So the discussion about accessibility in games is, in my not-so-humble opinion, very misunderstood. You'd think people are arguing for one thing, but in actuality people have drastically different ideas on what constitutes as accessibility in video games. When some people hear that word, they think about stuff like special modes for colorblind people, content warnings, or something like an option to make spiders into something less spooky, things that are there to mitigate an inherent disability of sorts. But to some other people, accessibility is not just things to combat flaws, it's things that allow people to complete the game overall. To people of that camp, you being able to type in a cheat code in your game is as much of an accessibility option as a colorblind mode. And from this stems the conflict between these groups of people, the most basic example of which is the question of should Dark Souls get an easy mode or not. On one hand, the more people are able to enjoy your video game, the better it is for your game in general. You'll get more money, praise, and overall popularity. On the other hand, video games are a luxury item that have always required certain level of skill to be played, and that skill, that ability to complete a hard game, is not only a part of one's enjoyment of product, but also one of the foundations of a community. Remember that fandoms are proto-nationalist movements. Tribalism is not just expected, it is there by default. And similar things can be said about anything else, really. Content warnings are a good way to keep the customer informed about their purchase. After all, purposely triggering traumas in people is generally not considered to be a good thing morally and can get you into legal trouble. But at the same time, it's a bit bigoted of you to deny money to a product just because you don't like some parts of its content, don't you think? Not to mention that content warnings are also a good way to mask your bigotry as well. Is it really good when a bigot refuses to buy a game knowing that it was done by a person he doesn't like? Or returning to accessibility option, when does it stop being accessibility and starts being a cheat? Like in that recent Souls-like game about a crab, there is an option in the menu to equip a gun and one-shot every enemy in the game. This is certainly an accessibility option, allowing you to breeze through any combat section, or how in The Last of Us 2 there is a slider, if I recall, that would allow you to just be invisible when prone and pass through the enemies. Fair enough. But at what point you kinda look at these options and think, so what is even the point in you paying for this game in the first place if you're just gonna skip the parts of it you don't like? You're basically depriving yourself from content and making your overall experience worse. You might as well just watch a Let's Play of it at that point. Not to mention that sometimes the distinction on what is and what is not accessibility option may be extremely arbitrary. In the recent Stephanie Sterling video, called A Video Reminder for Those About to be Scammed by a Digital Deluxe Edition, she complained about a deluxe edition of Deathloop having a weapon that one-shots enemies, trivializing the combat in this combat-oriented game. She used this as an example of how exclusives and deluxe editions can sometimes harm the game, but I was thinking, so how is this any different from the ability to just get a gun in the options menu and kill everyone, huh? Both are ultimately the same accessibility for the player at the end of the day. The only difference is that one comes with the game for free and for everyone, while the other is exclusive to special customers who bought the thing in the first place. Which one is best depends solely on whether or not you're a collectivist or an individualist, really. But I guess the main issue is the question of worth. Why do you, listener, play video games? To escape? To achieve? To roleplay? I, for example, play video games to escape. It allows me to achieve control over my life real me will never have, and to play out my power fantasies. And from this enjoyment comes the later fascination with the story and the world overall, which is why I almost always play games on either easy mode or with cheats. I'm proud of that fact, even. But other people may not think of it this way, which is fair. After all, none of this matters anyhow.